Before I start this video, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and comment on this video what you want to watch next. Story 1. I was a sophomore in high school. I must emphasize the importance of the year, as cell phones, the internet, and effortless forms of mass communication at your fingertips were non-existent. There is ample backstory at this time in my life. My friends and I were very carelessly using a Ouija board that I found in my deceased great-uncle's attic after he passed. Again, I won't go into details here other than it was a wooden board, old, and had no instructions. We took it home, and my sisters and I, along with my friend, began to play with it. Weeks went by, a few months went by, and lots of weird stuff was happening in the house with my friends. I am a strong believer in the paranormal, and didn't question much of what was happening, as it was witnessed not by just me, but many others. I saw such occurrences change the belief of staunch skeptics in a matter of moments. Terrified most of the time, sleeping with my lights on and never alone. At times I was even amused by it. Then came a day in early spring that my friends and I were sitting around a table in the library of our high school. The topic always seemed to circle back around to what was happening in my house. There were 4 of us sitting at the table: myself, Monica, Kim, and Suzanne. I was beginning to get a little agitated and began to feel arrogant. So arrogant that I said aloud to my friends almost these exact: "If you're so powerful and so real, then you wouldn't be stuck at my house. So, show us a sign you can hear us from beyond the board." And just like that, all the lights in the entire library went out for an entire 5 seconds. When they came back, I continued my overconfident banter, laughing and saying, "Clearly, that's all you have." The bell rang shortly after, and it was time to go home. I didn't think too much of the incident after, but I knew my fake egotistical act may have some consequences down the line. That night, when I fell asleep, I had a dream. This was one of those dreams, or visions, if you may, that you wake from and feel it. You can recite every line in detail. To this day, I can still feel the resonance and remember it. The dream starts off in the morning as I began to walk to school from the street, and then plagued with a sense of terror and a sense that I was slowly being chased. There was a procession of black hooded figures, fully cloaked with no signs of human life underneath, just a human form. There were 6 of them, all with their heads down. It was broad daylight, and they were each carrying a torch. In the middle of them was a very tall figure, again all in black, with a red sash down the front of his cloak. He was not carrying a torch, but rather a long pewter staff. This is when I stopped studying the details of who this was. I knew who it was, and I knew they were after me, especially him. They were not running around in any type of haste. The procession was slow and methodical. I ran into the school fast and frantically began to look for a spot to hide in the library, as that was where my dreams put me. I jumped over these bookshelves, which were low to the ground, both in the dream world and the real world, and balled up on a shelf, hiding and praying not to be found. That's when I awoke, breathless. I said a few words as I got ready for school, and on the bus that morning, none of my friends involved in the library situation, all the Ouija stuff in general, were on the same bus route. I dared not speak a word of it to the kids I rode the bus with, as most of them I despised. When I arrived at school, finding my friends Monica and Kim waiting for me at the north entrance, as they did every morning, and I began to detail my dream to them. We had entered the main hallway as I finished recounting the dream when, running from the south entrance, which was a pretty good distance from us, was Suzanne. I do not feel I need to drive home the point that there were no cell phones and no conceivable ways of Suzanne getting any of this information. This is exactly as it happened and is 100% accurate. Trying as hard as she could to catch her breath, She looked at me and said, "I have a message for you from him. Tell Nicole she can run, but she can't hide." To this day, every time I tell the story, I envision him laughing still and saying, "I found her." So, about 6 months after I bought our house, I started noticing something odd. Every once in a while, I would catch sight of something out of the corner of my eye, and always assume it was my cat, since it was the same size and shape and moved like a cat. However, I would realize a few seconds later that my cat was in the yard or another room. It would try to look back, but nothing was ever there. It was so quick, I always dismissed it. Once at night, I saw it on the ceiling, and I about had a heart attack. I would also hear things in the house. I assumed my husband was doing the dishes due to the clinking in the sink, but then I would realize he was in the bedroom, and the kitchen was empty. It took about a year for my husband and I to start wondering aloud if we were actually seeing things or if something dubious was up. Turns out he was seeing stuff too, just little flashes here and there. My husband said he heard some stuff too, on his days off when no one was home. The biggest moment was when I woke up in the middle of the night and saw my cat curled up on my side table. I heard him purr. His fur looked darker, and his purr was lower. But I was half asleep and didn't notice. I went to the bathroom, and on my way, I passed my sleeping cat in the hallway. It actually took me a few seconds, but I literally felt my chest turn cold. I went back into my bedroom and saw that the bedside table was empty. We're pretty sure we have a ghost cat in our house. The only thing I know about the previous owners was that he was put into a mental hospital. I've had to routine a bunch of paperwork back over to him over the years because his affairs were very clearly not taken care of when he was hospitalized. My theory is that he had a cat that got lost in the shuffle, and they're still waiting for him to come home. Story 2. I work for a non-profit that helps mentally and physically disabled people live fulfilling lives. John and Chris are brothers. I work for the same company as Chris, but at a different house. There are several houses around the city and bordering area. He works at one that houses children only, 4 of them, I believe. His story begins on a graveyard shift, which he was working with one co-worker, a middle-aged woman. The house has alarms on the doors and windows, which are alarmed during the night to let them know if any kids are trying to leave when they shouldn't be. Chris was downstairs in the office. His co-worker was upstairs cleaning. Suddenly, all the alarms in the house went off. Every door and window. He sprang up, assuming the clients were planning a mass breakout, as he would later refer to it. He yelled to his co-worker to head out one door, and he went out the other, frantically looking for whoever was outside. He saw one client standing beneath a tree, but not apparently in a hurry. He thought he recognized the client to be someone called Eerie. He headed back inside, said something to that effect, and continued searching for the other clients. But after running around in a panic, he found no one. He gave up and headed inside to reconvene with his coworker. He said he found Barry, but no one else. She stunned him when she revealed that everyone was inside, having never left, including Barry. He said she must be mistaken. He was outside a big tree in the backyard. She wore her fear on her face when he insisted this. She explained how what he saw was, in fact, what staff of the house refer to as white dress. A ghostly woman wearing all white that seems to reside on the property, and is often seen under that tree. Needless to say, he was surprised, confused, and definitely creeped out. But the story doesn't end there. Sometime later, a client from another home whom Chris was very close to sadly died. He was sick for a while, and Chris was present for his final breaths in the hospital. He was wheelchair-bound when he was alive, and later a client at the white dress home. A client needed a wheelchair temporarily while recovering from a slip-and-fall accident. They brought the wheelchair that used to belong to Karen, and right away, Barry began fixating on it. When it was no longer in use, Barry would take it for his own enjoyment. Staff took note of this and couldn't explain where he loved it so much. He would be taken outside to a small hill, push it down the hill empty, and then return it to the top and do it over and over again. Barry is nonverbal and can't speak with spoken language, but he does understand speech and communicates using gestures. One useful gesture has him select Staff's left or right hand in a sort of this or that conversation. For example, they could hold out their hand and say, "Barry, do you want tacos for dinner tonight?" and identify it as the left-hand option. Or, "Do you want pizza for dinner tonight?" Right hand. And then he would choose. He also had a tic where he would hold his palm onto his face very close and sort of mumble into it. This is actually what Chris thought he saw white dress under the tree. He thought Barry was there doing that. This is important because Barry would often do this gesture when he played with the wheelchair. Staff got curious and thought they might be able to determine who Barry was speaking to and playing with in the wheelchair. They posed a sequence of this and that questions with fake names. "Barry, who's in the wheelchair? Is it Michael or Emily?" No response. "Is it James or Samuel?" No response. "Is it Stephanie or Teresa?" No response. They did this a few times before dropping in the real name casually. "Is it Karen or Jen?" Right away, he selected the correct hand. Everyone present was shocked. According to Chris, he was the only real link between Karen and this house. He didn't know each other, and he didn't believe anyone talked of the previous owner of the wheelchair, and he can't explain how Barry knew his name. Happened once the wheelchair arrived. But, and a bit confounded on details, I don't know. He claimed to have once heard someone calling his name, but no one was home but him. As I said, both Chris and John remained skeptics. They agreed these events are all strange, but ultimately are not convinced. I, and what I call a hopeful skeptic, would love for any of the paranormal subjects in the world to be verified, but I guess I need to see it myself to believe it. John summarized his feelings well by saying, "I'm not saying it was a ghost. I'm just saying weird things would happen while we had the wheelchair here, and they stopped when the wheelchair left." I asked about the current whereabouts of this wheelchair, but I forget what they said. Either they don't know, or it's somewhere else in the company where Chris no longer visits. If I can get hold of it, I'd love to ask for more details. I'd like to know what you guys think about these stories specifically. I'm curious to know more about what John said are referred to as anchor points. The wheelchair was present when Karen died. Apparently, some believed that souls, which I do not believe in, can attach themselves to physical objects of importance from a person's life. This logic doesn't make sense to me. Even if I suspend my disbelief and believe in ghosts, what makes me believe these ghosts can attach themselves to objects? Is it the same logic that ghosts haunt certain areas, homes, vehicles, or rooms? I'm just dying to be convinced, and I always love hearing more stories and reading theories and learning about this topic. Finally, I'd like to mention that This story doesn't end there, however. For reasons unknown to me, Chris took this wheelchair home for a while. Maybe it was a keepsake. He took it home with him, and weird things began happening around his house. Chris and John, like I said, are brothers. They live in a big house and rent it out with their girlfriends, as well as 2 others. One day, everyone was out except John and Chris's girlfriend. Both of them claimed the door to Chris's bedroom slammed much too loudly and hard to be explained by wind, especially since no windows in his bedroom were open. This happened a few times while the wheelchair was there, which is more interesting when you know that Karen would often get Chris's attention by slamming doors. John said other strange things had. I spoke to John. He also has videos of the chair moving by itself on flat ground. It was deleted on his phone, but he hopes a coworker still has it. He also clarified that he never really attributed these events to the chair until later, when he heard staff speculate there was a cursed object, and he put it all together. Lastly, he added that another boy at the house was able to describe white dress, and he often played with the wheelchair. The details get kind of confusing because the white dress stories and the wheelchair stories are separate, but he said it was all amplified once the chair arrived at the house. Finally, he told me of an incident where the wheelchair was rolling down hills and slamming doors, and it was strange to him because those were the things that Karen loved the most while he was alive. Before I start third story, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and comment on this video what you want to watch next. Story 3. My father's dad was a dog trainer. He had a huge room where he would train golden retrievers. One day, he sent my father a golden overseas, as he lived across the country. When he got him, he was overjoyed. He was a beautiful boy and would prance around and loved to play in the water. One thing he did was chew the legs of tables and other furniture, so my dad called him Chewy. Many people assumed he was named after Chewbacca, but this simply wasn't the case. When my parents adopted me, this dog was my companion. In pictures, I can see how protective he actually was. He was a really great dog in general. He loved the snow, and he was family. That's when we got the devastating news that he had heart disease and would last no more than a few years. Those years were golden. We did everything for his needs. And then he was gone. Now, this experience happened last night, and I will never forget it. Right now, I'm 17 and was adopted at the age of 2. It was probably midnight. I put my dog into my room and I walked out into the hall. When I turned, I could see an outline of Chewy. I could see his big black eyes, and his fur was as golden as could be. He was smiling as any golden retriever would do, and I felt an overwhelming sense of joy and happiness. I just smiled before walking into my room. Now, before this even happened, I always had a feeling he was laying in my room, even though my dog of right now, Baxter, was as well. When I first got my new dog, he would always look into the corner where Chewy used to lay. From then on, I knew that Chewy would always be with me. Story 4. My friend and I had a long day filled to the brim with fun and adventure, joyous and whimsical things. After we had spent most of the day in the downtown portion of Charleston, enjoying the cool breeze and watching the rough waters roll against the docks, we decided it would be best to head back before nightfall. Some time had passed, and we eventually arrived back in our city of Somerville. But our appetite for fun and excitement hadn't been sated yet, so we decided to drive around and look at a newer town that had been added close to us, a town called Summers Corner. It was a nice town, sure enough, but it felt off, unreal. It was heavy and almost suffocating. The feeling that was there wouldn't deter us, as we were quite the resilient bunch, always moving forward, keeping a smile on our face, even if the circumstances were pure, unadulterated agony. About a half hour into the drive, we discovered a street called Navajo Boulevard, which had immediately interested us, as the name itself is similar to the Native American tribe of the Navajo people, just with a slight spelling differential. These Native Americans live in the southern United States, a proud people. They have many traditions within their tribes, with one such telling of a frightful creature. This creature is pure evil, a true monster among men. It is known as the Yenel-Dushi, and is a shape-shifting, vile, heart-wrenched fiend. We started to drive down the road, our windows rolled down so that we could enjoy that cool southern breeze. It's a dark, starry night, and while beautiful above us, the feeling from earlier was thicker and almost encumbering. Immediately, I felt watched, not by the nightlife, which we noticed was eerily silent, but by something else. Whatever was watching us didn't want us there at all. It felt as though whatever it was close to us. Its presence was intimidating and quite malicious, not to mention that it put us on edge. Our eyes peeled and ourselves readied for whatever may happen next. What seemed like an hour or so had passed when, suddenly, the weather had changed. No wind before, a heavy gust slammed itself against the car, nearly pushing it off the road and into the woods. Our hearts were about to beat out of our chests from the shock of it all, or at least mine was. Just then, as I tried to keep us on the road, we saw something pass by the car. It was grotesque, knotted with malice and spiteful things. Its eyes, as pale as silver as the moon, gazed into our souls, sending nothing but fear throughout our bodies. We were motionless now, shrinking into our seats as this abomination grew closer. It unhinged its jaw and let out a horrific scream, snapping us back to reality. I put the car in gear and we drove the hell out of there. Unfortunately, the feeling was intensified as we got back onto the road and sped away. Another gust of wind slammed into the car. Suddenly, my friend yelled for me to look out the window. Right behind my seatbelt on the outside of the car was that monster. And that's when I saw this awful thing in its entirety. It had reddish-pale skin and eyes that seemed to have no end, with gaping reptilian slits for pupils. The horns from atop its forehead gave it a demonic appearance. Our fear intensified beyond belief as a result. It unhinged its maw and revealed a row of sharp and twisted teeth. A hand with long claws stretched at the glass, making us scream to high heaven as we were driving out of the neighborhood, going as fast as we could. The damned thing smiled at us and faded away. The breeze scattered the leaves on the road where it sauntered. After it had jumped from my car, it was gone, but the feeling of fear that it left us with would haunt us for months to come. Story 5. I was cooking with my sister. She was boiling the pasta and eggs, and I was making a chef salad, meaning I was cutting the lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers, cheese, and salami. I asked her to cut one of the cheeses when this happened. I was cutting the salami while my sister was cutting the ricotta cheese when I felt a warm hand, the palm of the hand to be exact, slowly pushing me forward towards the table. The palm was at the left side, at a place underneath your shoulder, at the same level as your armpit. The hand slowly removed its palm from me and the place was numb. It was a tingling, warm sensation, but my entire body froze instantly. My sister and I didn't see anyone or anything, but she saw me. How 1 minute I was joking, and how the roles inside our household were reversed, and the kids did most of the chores while the adults were playing on their phones or sleeping. When I gasped, my body moved forward. Now, the first couple of seconds, my brain thought it was our dad, trying not to scare me by touching me because behind me is the terrace door that leads to a room that was supposed to be the balcony. But my grandparents closed it and turned it into a sunroom that leads to another set of terrace doors that leads to the master bedroom. But the fact that our dad could be heard snoring, and I felt the hand scared me. My sister didn't freak out as much, but she got scared seeing me become white like snow from fear. When I explained to her what I felt, she told me some days she feels the same thing, especially at night, a warm hand on her back before she falls asleep. She told me she thought it was only her mind playing tricks on her. Then I told her that many times I have fought the sharp or someone touching me as I do chores around the house. One time, I was dancing, and I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned to see if Mom or Dad or an aunt or my sister were in the house and were trying to get my attention, but I saw nothing. One time, I felt it in my hair, like a stroke, after I woke up from a nightmare 2 days ago. I was bolted awake. My entire body jerked forward because of the nightmare. I can't recall what happened in it. I just knew I was in danger when I felt the hand stroking my hair, and when I turned, I saw nothing but the Christmas tree. I thought I had unplugged it. When I looked at my phone, it said 9:45 a.m., so I went to take my 10 a.m. pill and fall back asleep. It's not the first time, but it was the first time it happened while I was with someone else in the room. I don't know if it's a friendly ghost, one of my grandparents, or any other loved one that I've lost, as we've had many through the past decades. My best friend said that it might be muscle spasms, but why do they feel like a warm hand? My sister also complained a few months ago that she feels watched in her room at night, and that is why she sleeps with the music on and covers over her head. And I told her that it must be Grandma, since the room my sister is in was my grandma's favorite room. She used to pray and listen to the church on the radio when she couldn't attend. The house was built in 1978, and my grandparents bought it in 1938. My grandparents were the first residents. My house, along with the rest of the apartments in the building, was also built in 1978. The area before it was built in was a river and farms, according to my mother's knowledge. Could it be a ghost or something else? A mantra of familiar words. Please don't forget to like this video. Subscribe to our channel and comment on this video what you want to watch next.